And so the title of the article, written by Jillian Bracco, title of the article is MLK's famous criticism of Malcolm X was, quote, a fraud, the author finds. So Jonathan, I believe it's Ike, his name is Ike, was deep in the Duke University, this is a quote, deep in the Duke University archives researching his new biography of Martin Luther King Jr. when he made an alarming discovery. King's harshest and most famous criticism of Malcolm X, in which he accused his fellow civil rights leader of fiery demagogic oratory, appears to have been fabricated, end quote. Jamar, so did you hear about this? As a historian, how did this make you feel? And this is funny. This is funny on two different notes because it applies to you because I call you Roots. And this is literally about the guy who wrote Roots. So I feel like this is it's like Inception, bro. It's like PTM Inception.
Alley-oop right there. As a historian, boiling mad. This does more than almost anything to undermine faith and confidence in the discipline of history. Now, it's important to note, Alex Haley's not a historian. He studies history, but that's not his primary vocation or training, right? But still, Roots is viewed as a work of history, and indeed it does contain historical elements like that. He's viewed as somebody who's an authority in terms of a voice and a perspective on history. So it still has a similar effect of undermining confidence in historical studies.
Let's read a couple of more excerpts from this particular article because I think this is crucial to understand what's really happening. So, and I quote, the quote came from a January 1965 Playboy interview with author Alex Haley, a then 43-year-old black journalist, and was the longest published interview King ever did. Because of the severity of King's criticism, it has been repeated countless times, cast as a dividing line between King and Malcolm X. The new revelation shows that King was much more open-minded about Malcolm than we tended to portray him, Ike said. Now, another quote says, Haley's legacy has been tarnished by accusations of plagiarism and historical inaccuracy in his most famous book, Roots. But this latest finding could open up more of his work to criticism, especially the autobiography of Malcolm X, as told to Alex Haley, released 9 months after Malcolm X's assassination in 1965. End quote. So this is important because we need to read what actually was said. Okay, so on page 60, this is, again, another quote. On page 60 of the 84-page document, Haley asks, and I quote, Dr. King, would you care to comment about the articulate former black Muslim Malcolm X, end quote. King responds, quote, I have met Malcolm X, but circumstances didn't enable me to talk with him for more than a minute. I totally disagree with many of his political and philosophical views as I understand them. He is very articulate, as you say. I don't want to seem to sound as if I feel so self-righteous or absolutist that I think I have the only truth, the only way. Maybe he does have some of the answer. But I know that I have so often felt that I wish that he would talk less of violence because I don't think that violence can solve our problem. And in his litany of expressing the despair of the Negro without offering a positive, creative approach, I think that he falls into a rut sometimes, end quote. Now, that's criticism, but doesn't sound like what actually appeared in the interview, which was, and I quote, this is what the interview contains, the published interview. Quote, and in his litany of articulating the despair of the Negro without offering any positive creative alternative, I feel that Malcolm has done himself and our people a great disservice. Fiery, demagogic oratory in the black ghettos, urging Negroes to arm themselves and prepare to engage in violence as he has done, can reap nothing but grief. End quote.
Dang.
What?
That is beyond
That's
editing.
Beyond liberty. This is beyond.
Whoa.
Like you're just literally rearranging and taking small portions and just rearranging everything and adding things that wasn't even included.
Embellishing it.
This is massive.
It is massive.
Because for most of us, the assumption that we have is that Malcolm and Martin represent these two opposing sides of Black thought and Black freedom and Black activism and the approach to how we get free as people. And so we cast them as polar opposites. And not only do we cast them as polar opposites, or we cast them as kind of maybe extreme avatars of their points of view, but also so do scholars and theologians. I remember James Cone wrote a book about between Martin and Malcolm. This whole idea of positing how do we parse through these two different ideas. I feel in between a little bit of Martin, a little bit of Malcolm. This is major, man. And this shapes debate, thought. Think about the decades of these conversations and the decades of people who dismiss one or the other based upon comments like these.